Something massive is happening in the land of fire and ice, and it's putting everyone on edge.
Scientists in Iceland are issuing a new warning amid a major volcano eruption. They say toxic gas spewing into the air could reach the capital and surrounding communities.
Experts are tracking a giant toxic plume heading for populated areas, but that's only half the story. A routine dig near the coast just revealed a hidden underground world that was never on the maps. It's a series of smooth-walled rooms carved into solid volcanic stone. This changes the entire timeline of how people lived here. Even crazier, new seismic readings suggest Iceland isn't sitting on ocean floor at all. It's actually sitting on a sunken piece of a continent. Melting land warnings. Iceland sits on one of the most active parts of the planet. This small piece of land lies directly on the mid-Atlantic ridge, where the North American and Eurasian plates slowly move apart. They shift about 1.5 inches every single year. This movement pulls the ground apart and allows heat and melted rock from deep inside the planet to rise toward the surface. Because of this, Iceland has more volcanoes than almost anywhere else. There are over 100 volcanoes on the island, and around 30 are still active. Some are easy to see, while others stay hidden under large glaciers. When these ice-covered volcanoes erupt, the heat can melt massive amounts of ice very quickly. This causes sudden floods that rush down valleys with almost zero warning. One eruption showed just how far this activity can reach. Back in 2010, a major volcano erupted and sent a thick cloud of ash high into the sky. That ash spread across Europe and forced thousands of flights to be canceled for days. It affected millions of travelers and disrupted daily life across an entire continent. But here's the catch. The same underground heat that causes eruptions also provides energy. Hot water rises naturally through cracks in the rock. It fills the famous hot pools and spas that everyone loves. Life above ground may look calm, but deep below the land is always under massive pressure. This is exactly why what was recently found under the surface surprised so many experts. Scientists are now issuing a new warning during this major eruption. They say toxic gas spewing into the air could reach the capital and surrounding communities very soon. This gas is mostly sulfur dioxide, and it can be extremely dangerous for anyone breathing it in. It's not just the lava that people have to worry about anymore. The air itself is becoming a threat. Researchers are using advanced sensors to track the plume, but the wind is unpredictable. The current seismic activity is different from what we've seen in the past. It's more intense, and it's happening in areas that were quiet for centuries. This is a key detail, because it suggests the plumbing system of the island is changing. When the ground shakes like this, it opens up new paths for magma and gas to escape. And get this, the latest readings show that the pressure is building faster than at any point in the last 100 years. Everyone is obsessed with the visual of the lava, but the real danger is invisible. The history of these eruptions tells a story of constant transformation. For starters, the island itself only exists because of this relentless volcanic output. Without the magma pushing up from the mantle, the mid-Atlantic ridge would just be another mountain range at the bottom of the ocean. But here, the flow is so strong that it built an entire country. Every few years, a new crack opens up and adds more square footage to the land. But that growth comes with a heavy price. Hands down, the most terrifying thing about Iceland is that you never know where the next vent will appear. It could be in a remote field, or it could be right under a town. In the last few months, we have seen ground inflation that suggests a massive volume of magma is moving just a few miles below the surface. This is not just local news, it is a global concern. For example, if a large eruption occurs under one of the massive ice caps like Vatnajökull, it could trigger a glacial flood that would wash away entire coastal highways. The sheer volume of water would be equivalent to some of the largest rivers in the world appearing in an instant. This is a key detail, because the infrastructure in Iceland is highly specialized but still vulnerable to these massive natural forces. See, the heat from the magma doesn't just melt the ice, it flashes it into steam, creating explosive eruptions that send ash miles into the atmosphere. And this is what happened in 2010, and it could happen again any day now. But there is another side to this fire. The heat provides nearly 100% of the country's electricity and heating. It is a double-edged sword. On one hand, you have free, clean energy that makes life possible in the Arctic. On the other hand, you are living on a giant pressure cooker that could go off at any moment. The toxic gas warning currently in place is a reminder of this delicate balance. If the sulfur dioxide levels get too high, people have to tape their windows shut and stay inside. It turns a beautiful landscape into a forbidden zone in a matter of minutes, and that's putting it lightly. The smell of rotten eggs is a constant reminder that the earth is breathing, and right now it sounds like it's screaming. What most people don't realize is that these eruptions aren't just isolated events. They are part of a cycle that has been going on for millions of years. But the cycle seems to be speeding up. Researchers are seeing more frequent activity in the Reykjavik Peninsula, an area that was dormant for over 800 years until recently. This sudden awakening is what has scientists truly terrified. It's not just one volcano. It's an entire system that is coming back to life. And as the ground shifts and cracks, it is revealing things that were never meant to be seen. Hidden structures are now being exposed by these shifts in the Earth's crust. A secret underground labyrinth. That constant hidden movement beneath the surface helps explain why a recent discovery in the south of the country has everyone talking. Near the historic area of Adi, a team from the Archaeological Institute of Iceland was carrying out a routine excavation. Nothing about the site suggested anything unusual at first, but as the team tested the ground, they noticed something strange. Parts of the soil sounded hollow and the surface felt less solid than it should. To find the cause, archaeologists carefully removed the top layer of soil. Almost immediately, they uncovered a small opening that led deep underground. At first glance, it might have been mistaken for a natural lava tube or a crack formed by volcanic heat. However, as they looked closer, the details told a different story. The walls were smooth in certain areas, and clear marks from hand tools were visible. These signs showed that this space had not formed naturally. It had been shaped by people long ago. As the excavation continued, the opening led into something much larger. The team discovered a network of connected chambers linked by narrow passageways. Some areas opened into wider rooms with flat floors, while others were tighter and more enclosed. The layout showed careful planning and was definitely not a simple pit dug for temporary shelter. This kind of discovery is very rare in Iceland. Most early structures were built from turf and wood. Those materials slowly decay in the wet and windy climate. Over time, many traces of early life just disappear. Rock-cut spaces, however, can survive for centuries. Nobody expected this to happen, but the discovery of these caves is forcing researchers to rethink the island's history. See, the marks on the walls aren't from modern drills. They are from iron tools that were used over 1,000 years ago. The amount of work required to carve into volcanic rock is insane. It would have taken dozens of people working for months to create just one of these rooms. And there isn't just one. There is an entire network. But here's the deal. Why would anyone go to all that trouble when they could just build a house on the surface? The prevailing theory is that these were used for protection. But protection from what? The weather is the obvious answer, but some experts think there was a deeper reason. The level of detail in these carvings is what truly stands out. In some of the larger chambers, there are benches carved directly into the rock walls. There are also small alcoves that look like they were meant for oil lamps or candles. This suggests that people were spending a significant amount of time down there. It wasn't just a place to store grain or shelter animals. It was a living space. But here's the kicker. Some of the chambers are over 20 feet, 6 meters, below the surface. Now, at that depth, the temperature remains a constant 40 degrees Fahrenheit, 4 degrees Celsius, all year round. In an Icelandic winter, where the temperature can drop to 0, that underground room would feel like a tropical paradise. But it's not that simple, though. The rock they carved into is palagonite tuff, which is basically ancient volcanic ash that has been compressed into stone. While it is easier to work with than hard basalt, it still requires a massive amount of physical labor. Imagine swinging a heavy iron pick in a dark, cramped space for 10 hours a day. The sheer will required to build this network is mind-blowing. And get this, the archaeologists found traces of soot on the ceilings. This proves that people were burning fires or lamps inside these rooms for long periods. What most people don't realize is that these caves were likely hidden. The entrance was small and could have been easily covered with turf or stones. This brings up a whole new set of questions. Were the early settlers hiding from someone? There are legends of Irish monks living in Iceland before the Vikings arrived. These monks, known as the Papar, were known for seeking out remote and isolated places to pray. Could these be their secret hermitages? Or were the Vikings themselves building bunkers to survive the clan wars that were common in the early days of the settlement? The mystery is deep, and the evidence is scarce because so much of the organic material has rotted away. But the tool marks remain. They are like a fingerprint from the past, showing us exactly how the stone was chipped away bit by bit. The crazy part is how many of these systems might still be out there. Iceland is covered in volcanic rock, and much of it is soft enough to carve. We have only scratched the surface. Every time a new earthquake hits or a farmer digs a new fence post, there is a chance of finding another hidden world, and that's putting it lightly. The scale of this network suggests a much larger population than we previously thought lived in this part of the island. It wasn't just a few isolated families. It was a community that lived, worked, and maybe even died underground. Evidence found inside the chambers points to a very specific group of people: settler rock dwellings. Those questions about who made these spaces began to make sense when historians examined the early settlers. Most experts agree that the caves were shaped during the Viking-age. This was when people from Norway and nearby regions settled in Iceland between about 800 and 1060 AD. Life in Iceland at that time was not easy at all. Trees were very limited, and wood was a precious resource. Because of this, people often built homes from turf, stone, and whatever natural shelter they could find. Digging into soft volcanic rock gave them extra protection from the strong winds and heavy snow. It kept them safe from the freezing temperatures, too. Underground spaces remained much warmer in winter and cooler in summer. Archaeologists also found small objects and tool marks that helped them understand how old the site was. Bits of charcoal and organic material were radiocarbon dated. The results showed the caves were in use during the peak of the Viking period. That scientific testing helped confirm what the layout and tools already suggested. These caves are not just empty spaces in the rock. They are physical evidence of how early families adapted to survive in a rugged and changing land. Hands down, this is one of the most important Viking finds in decades. For starters, it shows that they were much more comfortable living underground than we ever thought. We always imagine Vikings in large wooden longhouses with roaring fires, but the reality was likely much more subterranean. They utilized the Earth's natural insulation to survive winters where the sun barely comes out. But here's the catch. Some of these caves are located in areas that are prone to flooding. This means the Vikings had to understand the local geology perfectly to avoid being trapped. They weren't just farmers, they were expert surveyors. They knew exactly which layers of rock were safe to carve and which would collapse. It's not that simple, though, because the volcanic activity back then was just as intense as it is now. Imagine carving a home into a volcano while it's still active. The settlers had to be incredibly resourceful. For example, they used the volcanic stone not just for walls, but for tools as well. They carved out stone bowls and weights for weaving looms. Inside the caves, researchers found piles of animal bones, mostly sheep and goats. This tells us that the caves might have also served as barns during the worst of the winter storms. Keeping your livestock alive was the difference between life and death. If your sheep froze, your family starved. By bringing them into these hand-carved bunkers, the Vikings ensured their survival. But here's the deal. Living in a cave with dozens of animals and people would have been incredibly crowded and dirty. The air would have been thick with smoke and the smell of wet wool. It wasn't a glamorous life, but it was a functional one. They even carved out drainage channels into the floors to keep the sleeping areas dry. This shows a high level of planning and hygiene for the time. See, the Vikings are often portrayed as simple raiders, but these caves prove they were sophisticated engineers. They understood how to manage moisture and airflow in a closed environment. And get this. Some of the rooms have small windows carved through the rock that align with the rising sun on the winter solstice. This suggests that the caves might have also had a spiritual or timekeeping purpose. The thing is, we still don't know why they stopped using them. As the Viking Age came to an end and Iceland became more established, people started building larger turf houses on the surface. Maybe the caves were seen as a sign of poverty or a relic of a harder time. Or maybe, as some researchers suggest, the geological stability of the region began to change. Large earthquakes could have made the ceilings unsafe. If you are sleeping in a room and a 500-pound, 220-kilo rock falls from the ceiling, you aren't going to stay there long. The evidence of collapse is everywhere in the older cave systems. You can see where the settlers tried to shore up the walls with stone pillars, but eventually, nature won. The very rock that protected them became their biggest threat. This is a key detail because it mirrors the struggle Icelanders face today with the current volcanic eruptions. You can build all the defenses you want, but when the earth decides to move, you have to get out of the way. The very ground they lived in was slowly becoming a death trap. Hidden cave perils. These caves are carved into volcanic rock that looks solid and unbreakable at first. However, time has quietly changed them from the inside out. Over hundreds of years, rainwater and melted snow have seeped into tiny cracks in the stone. When winter arrives, that trapped water freezes and expands. When temperatures rise, it melts again. This constant freezing and thawing slowly weakens the rock. It widens fractures that were once barely noticeable to the naked eye. Because of this slow damage, entering the caves today is never a simple task. Researchers must carefully inspect every inch of the ceilings and walls before they move forward. Loose rock can fall without any warning at all. Even a small piece breaking free can be dangerous in a narrow underground space. To reduce this risk, teams often rely on high-tech ground scanning tools before anyone even steps inside. These instruments send waves into the rock, which allows scientists to detect hidden weak spots. They can see things that are invisible from the surface. The challenges do not stop with the cave walls themselves, though. The ground above the caves is also in constant motion. Iceland experiences thousands of small earthquakes every single year. Most are too weak to be felt on the surface, but underground they can still cause subtle shifts. Air quality adds another layer of serious concern. In spaces that have been sealed off for centuries, oxygen levels can drop very low. At the same time, gases like carbon dioxide can build up to lethal levels. These conditions can become hazardous very quickly if you aren't careful. Because of these risks, every single step inside the caves is slow and carefully planned. See, the scientists are terrified that the current volcanic eruption could cause a massive collapse. If the ground shakes hard enough, these ancient structures could be crushed forever. It's a race against time to document everything before nature takes it back. And that's putting it lightly, because the rock is already showing signs of fresh stress. What most people don't realize is that palagonite tuff is basically compacted volcanic ash. It is a very porous material. This means it absorbs water like a sponge. When the water level in the soil rises due to heavy rain or melting glaciers, the weight on the cave ceilings increases dramatically. At the same time, the rock itself becomes softer and more likely to shear, and this is exactly what geologists are seeing in the latest surveys. The ceilings are bowing in the center of the largest rooms. For starters, this makes any archaeological work extremely slow. You can't just walk in with a shovel. You have to install steel supports and monitor the vibration levels constantly. Hands down, the most dangerous part is the unknown. We don't know how many more rooms are hidden behind the walls that have already collapsed. If a researcher digs in the wrong spot, they could trigger a chain reaction that brings down the whole hillside. And it's not just the physical weight of the rock. It is the chemical changes. Volcanic gases like sulfur dioxide can react with the water in the rock to form weak acids. Over centuries, these acids eat away at the minerals that hold the stone together. It turns solid rock into something that has the consistency of wet sand. This is a key detail because it means these caves are disappearing even without an earthquake. The current volcanic activity is just accelerating the process. As the magma moves beneath the surface, it heats up the groundwater. This hot, acidic water circulates through the cracks and dissolves the rock from the inside out. Scientists are literally watching history melt away. They are using three-dimensional laser scanners to create digital models of the caves. This way, even if the physical structure collapses, we will still have a perfect record of what it looked like. The crazy part is that we are finding similar instabilities in modern tunnels and basements in the area. The Earth is telling us that it is not a solid foundation. It is a living, breathing, and shifting mass. We are just guests on its surface. But as the geologists looked deeper into why this specific part of the island is so unstable, they found something that defies every rule of geology. They found a secret that has been buried for over 50 million years. Deep below the rock lies a secret that defies the laws of ocean geology. Sunken continent theory. While archaeologists focus on dangers near the surface, geologists are looking much deeper. They want to know what exactly is happening under the entire island. Geologists from universities in Iceland and Europe used earthquake data and gravity readings to map the crust. They also looked at heat flow measurements to understand what lies beneath. What they found did not match the usual picture of thin ocean crust at all. In most parts of the Atlantic Ocean, the crust under the seafloor is about 4.3 miles, 7 kilometers thick. It is mainly made of dense volcanic rock. But under Iceland, the measurements show a crust that is much thicker. In some places, it exceeds 18.6 miles, 30 kilometers. That is closer to the thickness of continental land, like what we see under the United States, not under the open ocean. Because of this, some researchers have suggested that remnants of an ancient continent may still be buried there. They call this hidden area Icelandia. The idea is that when the Atlantic Ocean opened millions of years ago, parts of an older landmass did not fully sink. Iceland later formed on top of this thick continental base. If this is true, it helps explain why Iceland has such crazy volcanic activity. It's not just a ridge, it's a collision of old and new Earth. Iceland was never just a land of volcanoes and ice. It is a place where the ground keeps records of both nature and human life. What scientists uncovered here is more than just an old structure or a strange theory. It is a reminder that the Earth can still surprise us in ways we never expected. For starters, the existence of Icelandia would mean our maps of the ancient world are completely wrong. Hands down, this would be the biggest geological discovery of the century. The crazy part is that this thick crust might be acting like a lid on a pressure cooker. It traps the heat and magma until it can't hold it anymore. This explains why the eruptions in Iceland are so frequent and so powerful. Basically, the island is a geological freak of nature. But here's the catch. If this continental fragment is there, it might contain minerals and fossils that we thought were lost forever. It could be a piece of Greenland or Norway that got left behind when the plates moved. This changes the entire story of how the Atlantic Ocean was formed. It wasn't just a clean break. It was a messy, violent process that left pieces of the continent scattered on the ocean floor. And Iceland is sitting right on top of the biggest piece. See, the implications of this are massive for our understanding of plate tectonics. If a continent can be hidden under a volcanic island, where else could this be happening? What most people don't realize is that this thick crust also affects the gravity in the region. Scientists have noticed gravity anomalies around Iceland for years. They couldn't explain why the pull was so much stronger than it should be. But now, with the Icelandia theory, it all makes sense. There is more mass under the island than we realized. There is a dense, ancient core that is anchoring the whole region. This core is also what makes the volcanic eruptions so toxic. As the magma rises through the old continental crust, it melts the ancient rock and picks up chemicals like sulfur and fluorine. This creates the deadly gas plumes that are currently terrifying the people in the capital. The gas isn't just coming from the mantle, it is being cooked out of the ancient continent buried below. This is a key detail because it means the toxicity of the eruptions is directly linked to the hidden landmass. The more the Earth shifts, the more of this ancient material gets released into our atmosphere. It is like a ghost from the past coming back to haunt the present. Researchers are now scrambling to take core samples from the deepest parts of the island. They want to find a piece of that ancient rock and prove once and for all that Icelandia exists. Could an entire lost continent really be hiding right under our feet without us knowing? What do you think is still waiting to be found in Iceland's deep underground chambers? Tell us what you think in the comments. And if you enjoyed this mystery, give it a like and subscribe for more. Thanks for watching.